Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me as always is...
Jim, otherwise
this...
known as Blinken.
Blinken. That doesn't make sense just yet. So this week...
It doubly doesn't make sense. I didn't realize that.
This week we watched Young Frankenstein. No, we didn't. Because turns out it's impossible. So the last time I chose a movie, I chose Young Frankenstein by Mel Brooks as a movie, as it's one of my favorite comedies of all time. Turns out it's near impossible to stream in Australia. All the not so legal copies I could find were Spanish or weirdly dubbed or weirdly cut. So we had to pull an audible. And that audible was, I chose another Mel Brooks movie that I enjoyed from my childhood and teen years, and that is Robin Hood Men in Tights. So yes. The Blinken reference now makes sense.
I was sort of in disbelief, can I just say, when, like, you know, the days were passing and it was sort of like, have you found it? Have you found where to watch it? No. Have you found where to watch Young Frankenstein? No. And then eventually it's like, we can't find it. We can't get it.
I've ordered it from Amazon on DVD.
Right. Okay. So eventually we will be able to get right. We will be able to get back around to it. But yeah, it just wasn't going to happen. So, but I was thrilled with your backup pick of Men in Tights because I know this movie very well from my childhood as well. So, which is in some ways, it's sort of like Young Frankenstein. I haven't seen, but Men in Tights I have seen so many times. Like, you know, and to the point where watching it again, I was just like, I knew every line, I knew like every situation. It was so familiar. It was almost like bizarre kind of actually watching it again because it's been a long time. But look, is it worth you know, you telling us the plot of Robin Hood Men in Tights?
Well, yeah, I can, absolutely. So we recently watched a movie called The Adventures of Robin Hood. If you want to go back and listen to the plot synopsis of that movie, pretty much nails it. But it's the Robin Hood story. So we have Robin Hood is at the Crusades. Through some shenanigans, he comes home to find out that his home has been repossessed in the most Mel Brooks way ever. He gets his band of merry men together. He meets Maid Marian. The difference in this is that it kind of directly spoofs a different Robin Hood film, which is the Kevin Costner Prince of Thieves. So it follows that kind of plot structure a little bit more. So you have like kind of more Sheriff of Nottingham focused evil doing plot, although it's the Sheriff of Rottingham. But yeah, so it's Robin Hood, merry men, Maid Marian, the archery competition, all that stuff comes back, but it is in that kind of Mel Brooks spoof flavor. I don't think we really need to add much more to plot synopsis in that realm.
I think that might be your best ever plot synopsis.
Wow.
Just sort of, just nailed it. Just,
Thanks.
You know, look, yeah, it's kind of like this other Robin Hood movie that we've already seen, and
we've watched it.
You know, it's a little bit like the Kevin Costner one, but essentially it's Robin Hood. There's an archery contest, and that's all we have to say about that.
That's why I am a professional. And a professional who gets to the facts.
Yeah.
Robin Hood Men in Tights, released in 1993, directed by Mel Brooks, of Young Frankenstein, The Producers, Spaceballs, and the History of the World, Part 1. Screenplay by Mel Brooks, Evan Chandler, and J. David Shapiro. One notable fact of J. David Shapiro, he wrote Battlefield Earth. So he wrote the first draft. And he claims not a lot made it through to the end. But your name's still there.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah,
you would.
You'd claim that. You'd claim that hard. Now, I've never known how to pronounce this man's name. I'm sure you'll correct me, but starring Kerry Yules. Is it Yules?
Look, that's what I've always said. You know what I mean? Yeah. But again, I've only ever seen it in print.
Richard Lewis, Roger Rees, Amy Yabak, David Chappelle, which it was his first film. At 19 years of age, Isaac Hayes and Tracy Ullman. Budget of $20 million, box office of $72 million. like I want to go on a bit of a Mel Brooks rant to start this off, if that's okay. So Mel Brooks is one of those those people who transitioned through eras of film. Like he started off kind of vaudevillian, all those time of days. He kind of transitioned into kind of almost like stand-up comedy specials with like him and Rob Reiner and all those sort of guys. And then he kind of found this niche, this kind of like Weird Al-esque world to live in, of these kind of goofy yet smart yet really kind of endearing films of spoofs. And Robin Hood Men in Tights, I think, although not the best one of these things, it is the best example of what he does, because it's so clearly kind of crafted and meticulously thought out. And you could tell there were these moments where, obviously, when they were writing this film, they were bouncing these jokes back and forwards until they got to really where they wanted them to be. I think where this movie excels in the kind of Mel Brooks pantheon is character. A lot of the time, characters are jokes, and they're jokes in this too, like Blinken, but they're more charactery because of the framework of Robin Hood. Like, we know what these characters are meant to be, so he's able to kind of create more character behind the joke. But yeah, like Mel Brooks is someone, Blazing Saddles, Spaceballs, Young Frankenstein, that all those movies have made me laugh very, very hard. And this one made me laugh again. I've seen this a 1,000 times as well. And, Blinken on watch is still one of the funniest things on film. Blinken on the Watchtower is one of the funniest things committed to film.
Guessing? I guess no one's coming.
Like, it's so good. It's like so good.
It's the thing that I like, my big takeaway from Robin Hood Men in Tights really is that it is that style of comedy where if there is a second of film being shot, then a joke is being inserted. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's literally, and I love that. Like, sometimes you'll rock up to a comedy and, you'll have a whole scene without a joke because the scene's doing maybe heavy lifting for character or maybe something else. And in this one, the jokes are the important thing, or the gags, if you like. It's visual sight gags, it's jokes, it's wordplay, and it's no opportunity lost. Do you know what I mean? It's everything that could possibly get a laugh is workshopped to then get a laugh from somebody. Do you know what I mean? And not absolutely everything lands. So much of it is corny and insane. But like, if you're a kid, it all lands. Can I just say, if you're 12, like there's not a single gag in this movie that you don't love to bits,
I think the genius of it, even as an adult, if it doesn't land, you don't have to wait long for the next joke. You're not sitting and thinking about how that wasn't funny. You're being hit by the next joke, and that one will make you laugh, or the one afterwards. So it's that kind of fast-paced comedy of, like, it doesn't let you sit with something you didn't enjoy if you didn't think it was funny. You've already moved on to something that you did think was funny.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, it's really almost that stand-up philosophy, where it's joke, and it just bombards, but in the best way. So, and I think they can do that with this story because it's so familiar to the audience, and that's kind of the genius of it as well. Like, because they don't have to tell people much about who Robin Hood is or the Sheriff of Nottingham or whatever. Like, it's sort of all just there. Who was, for you, the standout character of the film? Like, what's the character who, because I've had lots over the years, and I have one from this latest rewatch as well, but like, who's your standout?
I have a standout character and I have a standout actor. I'll go with your original question. Standout character. Man, Prince John, he does some work. Like the mole, the cowering, the kind of emphasis on words, the kind of non-stop, just yellow-bellied, kind of cringy, Jewishy kind of like stereotypes, things that they're playing with there, is just so on point and so good.
And
Yourself?
I asked you that question because that was my takeaway from this rewatch. I was just like, Prince John is on fire. Like
Yeah.
every possible, comedic moment that could be had, he has it. And even just his facial expressions, like characters will walk into a scene and he'll be doing something with his face that you're just like, that's probably not even scripted because it's just your face. Like it's just doing something hilarious,
So for those of you who don't know, that character is played by Richard Lewis, and he was a stand-up comic, and his stand-up comedy was very much that brand of like kind of anxiety, kind of like anxious kind of thing, and he's brought all of that to the screen and more. And he was obviously cast perfectly, and he's just brought that energy that kind of he is known for.
I have to say as well, like something that, and I think quite often, or at least when I think back on the movie, I didn't realize how funny she was, but it was Maid Marian as well, and it's half to do with the accent, which in any other movie you'd say this accent is awful, but it works so well what she's doing for comedy, like, and just this breathy delivery, because it's not just the accent, it's the delivery of the lines as well. And it's just perfectly pitched. Like I was literally just laughing at everything she was saying and the way she was saying it, because it's this combination of delivery and accent, which again is just so over the top. And again, if you were in any other movie, you'd be like, that accent's awful, but here it's like it works because it's comedy. It's just this terrible kind of like breathy English-ish, kind of accent. So
it's a strange thing about the comedy in this film. You explain the jokes. You explain on paper what this movie is to somebody, and I think most people go, that won't work, or that won't be funny, or that won't be good. But it plays this really weird role of comedy movies in general, kind of broad strokes, that usually they play it really earnest, and the comedy is in that the characters take the situation seriously, or they kind of wink at the camera, right? And Mel Brooks movies are kind of this weird combination of the two. The characters are earnest and winking at the camera. Like that's part of the thing, right? Like they fully accept the world they're in every way, and the world they're in every way is ridiculous. It's insane.
One of my favorite examples of that has to be you must go now or you will miss the tide, and he just swims. He just swims from
you get like the Indiana Jones dots across the map, and it's just him like swimming from the Crusades.
From North Africa to England in one hit. Just cuts to him on the beach in England, and I'm just like, no one even questions that. How is he going to get back? It's like you gotta go, you gotta swim, and he just runs into.
And it's almost like, oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry, yeah, you're right.
Brilliant, so good.
Part of what makes this great, and we briefly mentioned it before this podcast, is a lot of the jokes in this movie, if you were to write them down on a piece of paper today, you go, that's wrong. You can't say that. And a lot of times those things in these movies are said by people or written by people who it's okay for them to say it, but it's still, you wouldn't commit it to paper. But it works because it's good. It's not cheap. It's not really trying to it's not trying to make anyone look stupid. It's not insulting anybody, but it plays with cliches. It plays with, gender. It plays with race a little bit. It plays with all these things in a way that today wouldn't be done, but it's still funny and good to watch. And I would show this movie to anybody without fear of them being offended.
I think though as well, like the comedy comes from the characters, in a way that, something like Arrested Development got away with so much more than any other show, but it's because the characters are the ones who are actually saying these things, which are, you know, absurd and incorrect, you know, politically and socially. And that's sort of part of the humor, is that, you know, it's not done without a lack of awareness, you know, that this is incorrect. This is not the right way to make this, you know. But of course, it's out of a place of characters. The characters are all idiots, every single one of them. Like, you know, whether they're hero or villain or somewhere in between, the characters, they're all just stupid. Like, you know, so you kind of forgive them a lot because they're so dumb. Like, so, which again is a lot of that charm of Arrested Development and how they sort of got away with so much. And I would sort of say this is the same sort of thing to me here. So it's also like, you know, it's amazing to see a cast that is literally perfect. There's no weak links here. There's no person who you go, oh, that person doesn't get it or can't do it, like, you know, or that's stunt casting. And yet, you know, there are no famous people here. Like, there are no, you know, big movie stars. There are people kind of from the comedy world. You know, you say Dave Chappelle, but he's not a movie star, right? He's a comic.
Well, he's not even famous back then.
No,
like,
that's right.
Your famous people in this movie are like your Isaac Hayes, your Tracy Ullmans, your Mel Brooks with his cameo. Like, they're famous because they've done stuff together before, or they're on TV or things like that. They're not famous because they're movie stars.
Yeah, or you have a random Patrick Stewart cameo.
Not random. Not random at all. The story behind that cameo is brilliant.
Well, so, now's the time. Tell us.
Originally, Sean Connery was going to reprise his part of King Richard at the end of that film. He had 2 requests, though, to do it. He requested $1 million, not to be paid to himself, but to his charity. And he wanted to do the role in a dress. Because there's something famous about Sean Connery, is that he never gets it. like he doesn't get stuff so hard. Like, he's famous for, like, he turned down Gandalf, and his response to that was to do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because he's like, well, this is what is popular. I don't think he got the comedy, and comedy to him was that he was King Richard in a dress. And so Mel Brooks is like, well, no, we don't have $1 million to pay you up. That's how we'll get out of this. But they did approach him for it. And then basically there was this kind of like Patrick Stewart, and they're like, hey, Patrick, yeah, could you do this role? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, why didn't you get Sean to do it? And he goes, oh, this. And he goes, oh, I guess, all right, Scottish accent then. And that was his kind of nod to Sean Connery that role. And I'm just like, it's so good.
It is pretty amazing. Good. So, like, is there anything about the film, Ben, that then you don't like? Is there anything that you bump on, or you look at it? Because it's what is it, 30 years old? 30 years old now?
It's really hard to criticize a movie like this. It's almost in a strange way, like, if you were to review this movie, I think you'd be insane. Like, to properly review it, right?
Because it would be frustrating. You imagine it's opening weekend, this comes out, you're a movie reviewer, and you're just like, do I have to? There's no point. Like, it's just a crazy spoof that, you know, is literally down to your taste in humor. Like, that's the whole...
And if you want to spend the time and look at what insanity movie reviewing is, you can go down to the reception part of the Wikipedia page for this. And it's basically about how it got reviewed quite poorly, because if you think of it as a piece of cinema, it's probably not really up there, right? If you were to put a reviewer's lens on it, it doesn't work with proper plot structure. It doesn't work with proper character interactions. The script is all over the place by its nature and all these sort of things. So if you were to review it, it's fine. The good reviews are basically people saying, hey man, like, you can't review this, I loved it, or I enjoyed it, or whatever like that. Parts of this movie, these sort of movies always feel a little bit too long. And it's just by their nature of joke after joke after joke after joke, right? Because there's always going to be jokes you don't like, and eventually, even though they're separated, they spread out a little bit. But that is my only criticism of this film. And again, it's not perfect. It's not even in the realms of excellent. It's a good, stupid movie.
You know what I find interesting about Men in Tights is like for all its absurdity, and for all of the joke density that I was talking about, where it's just, a joke a second, somewhere buried in there is actually, it has these moments where it sort of strikes into classic adventure film, I guess mythos, if you like. And it's sort of like, sure, there are moments where we've seen them before, but if you think about it, like, it's the aesthetic of the film is based directly off the Errol Flynn version,
Yes.
In a way that, obviously is absurd. In when you actually look at those particular costumes and whatnot, like they've deliberately like not updated them. Like it's like the movie was made in the 1930s, So it's kind of like, but at the same time, I'm like, well, I'm seeing, Carrie Ills do, this sword fighting in the Great Hall kind of thing, and I'm like, and it's good, like it's actually kind of good, like and we're watching this swashbuckling, and the score's really rousing in that moment, and you kind of go, somewhere in here, there's actually kind of a cool adventure film, and you don't really expect that because it doesn't have to have that. Like it's so silly like that.
You're not saying this, but I want to. It kind of builds off what you're saying. There's this weird, I think, thought out there that comedy doesn't care. Like it's like anything goes. It's loosey goosey. But I think good comedy cares more than any other genre, because if it doesn't, it's you can't get it right. And this is a love letter of a film.
Yes.
Like it loves its source material. It's not making fun of it. It's kind of using it to kind of make fun of a lot of different things. And it loves what it did. Like Mel Brooks loved this subject matter so much that he actually had a TV series before this that was a comedy take on Robin Hood. Like he tried this before. Like he loved the source material. And you can tell, like, you were saying how good some of the sword fighting in the banquet hall and that looked. They did a boot camp of sword fighting for a month before this film. Like they cared. Like there was craft behind this, and it shows. Like because if you did this type of movie and you didn't put the craft behind it, it'd be silly garbage. Like,
well, it's also there's that interesting kind of you know rule or in comedy which says if you're doing parody, then your parody has to at least be as good as the thing that you're parodying. Otherwise, it's not funny. Like it has to actually achieve a certain bar of production value and competency and mirroring the aesthetic of what you're trying to actually parody. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And people don't really get it. So I think that banquet hall, as much as there's a joke a second, but there's also a few seconds of just genuine rousing, action, and they let it breathe there to allow that rule to kind of take place, to say, hey, we can also do this, and we care about this, as you say. So I think that's something that could easily get overlooked in this kind of movie as well. So
I think you've actually just clarified a thought for me. I was thinking while watching this movie, why don't they make these movies anymore? And then you've just solved the problem. They do make these movies now. But they are Scary Movie 43 or like these films that are just churned out because the joke is that one character is dressed up like Captain Jack Sparrow. That's the joke. Or like these kind of weird kids that go to Narnia, or there's throwaway jokes. Like these kind of like really poor imitations of what this was. What this could be. These kind of more tightly structured, sounds insane when you think about it, but tightly structured parodies. Like you're right, parody needs to hit a certain benchmark to actually be acceptable as a film, and people have lost that. They just kind of churn out these silly kind of gag fests that don't have something to them.
And it's interesting because, like, this, like, I call this an incredibly high quality parody, which is so so far different to, say, sketch comedy. Sketch comedy, which is just literally just going for a bit, and I don't want to actually denigrate sketch comedy because there's a lot of skill and effort that goes into that. But like, but this is actually quite different. It's a full feature film that is based on this one premise that they just commit to, for the entire runtime. And look, I think it works really well. Now, what's interesting is I don't know if any of the humor still works because this is a movie where I'm so familiar with it that I have absolutely no perspective anymore. Do you know what I mean? I knew every line in the movie. So if I was showing this to someone who'd never seen it before, I had no idea how it would play 30 years later because I just am like, I'm way too close to it.
I can't imagine showing this to like a Gen Z. Like I don't think it could work, right? Like I'd love to show it to somebody our age who hadn't seen it. I'd love to do that. And then I'd love to show it to a Gen Z and see what the different reactions were. I think you're kind of right in your fear of it no longer would translate to a new audience. But our familiarity helps us kind of keep carrying us along. Before we get too far, I mentioned that I had a favorite actor in this film. I think this movie would have been a spectacular flop. And I know it sounds obvious if Kerry Yules wasn't so fantastic in this movie. Like, he has to play a level of silly, and he's the one who's almost in every scene and has to interact with every character, and he has to do it just kind of every single time, and he has to work with different characters. And sometimes he's the surrogate for the audience where he gives the look of like, this is insane, what is this person? And sometimes he's the silly thing on screen. And that kind of interweaving would be so unintuitive for an actor. So kind of out of your element as anybody who kind of has done any sort of acting on screen or stage or anything like that. And he kind of does it so well.
And it's also, and you're right. And there's a third version in there too, which is like, sometimes he just has to be a Hollywood leading man in the same breath. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are scenes where he's like, I'm the butt of the joke because I'm being a moron right now. And then I transition to being a genuine heroic leading man and playing it straight. And then after that, I'm the audience surrogate who's laughing at these other idiots doing this other stuff. And he's got to kind of move from one to the other, all in, the space of a minute sometimes. And it couldn't have been easy. But of course, the performance is so confident, that you kind of just go, well done, because it doesn't look difficult. But when you actually sort of think about all of those modes, it must have actually been pretty hard, to do.
I can't comprehend it. I really can't. Like, I've done stage acting, I've done high school stuff. Like, I've mucked around with film and television and seen people act. And yeah, like, it's not Oscar stuff, but there's muscles being used there that I don't have, and I don't think many people do have in that way.
No, it was really it was a role that was perfect for that actor. It's that kind of like once in a generation, only he could have done that. So it's kind of amazing that it all sort of worked out. And obviously, look, he'd been in part of that mode, playing it a lot straighter in films like Princess Bride beforehand, but this is completely different in so many ways. So
he didn't think he could do it. He turned this movie down 3 times.
Yeah, wow.
Like, he was like, hey, thanks, I love you, Mel Brooks, but I can't do this. Like, I'm not the person you're looking for here. And then it's like, well, you are, because you've done it before. We're just asking you to do it again in a different format. Like, and it was this kind of weird thing where he eventually kind of said yes. And then you build the cast that you build around him that lets him shine. He lets them shine. Like, we've brought him up multiple times as a character that theoretically is a one-note joke, and that is Lincoln.
Yes.
And he is very extremely one-note. And the joke is he's blind. And he's kind of confidently blind. Like, he just it goes about his life. And there's a moment that we reference where he's up in a guard tower, and we have that surrogate moment where, Robin's like, Blinken, what are you doing? He's like, I'm on guard duty. He goes, but how? And he goes, I'm guessing. I'm guessing nobody's coming. He's like, get down there. And he's like, okay. And then you have this piece of physical comedy where he knocks the ladder and then steps straight out into nothing and falls. And he can see after he hits the ground. And then he turns around and hits a tree. And then he's blind again. And it's just this kind of rapid kind of joke, all on the one topic.
It's also one other thing that they do in this film, and this might sort of like, get us in for a landing, really, but it's a musical.
Yes.
Is the other thing that you just sort of go, oh yeah, and also there are these choreographed, musical numbers that are all through the film. Like there's probably 4 or 5 of them, and I'm just like, yeah, that they got that going on as well. Like, and they're doing that pretty well, and in a funny way, and in all these different styles, from rap to like sort of classic kind of Bugsby Berkeley kind of musical. Yeah. It's just like, what? Again, it's if it's funny, it's in. That's the deal with this movie. So
and it's definitely something he uses in a lot of his stuff, like Young Frankenstein, The Producers, quite obviously. Music and comedy in this era and the era before it were tied together. They were almost the same genre in a lot of places, like that kind of vaudeville, kind of Broadway type comedy. So, and he just does it so well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, Ben, I heartily enjoyed a trip down memory lane with Robin Hood Men in Tights. Are you ready, or do you have any final thoughts before we segue into what we might be looking at next time? I say might because I'm tortured by the Young Frankenstein experience, where we thought we were watching something.
Look, I've learnt a lesson. I will definitely, when I pick a movie, make sure we can watch that movie. I was really bummed that I had to switch movies, and then when I watched Robin Hood, I'm like, I'm less bummed now. Like that was all right. That was good. We will watch Young Frankenstein, and we will love it. I swear, Jim, we will love it. But yes, I'm ready for the next pick.
Well, look, I thought that this is just something we had to do, Ben. We just had to do this. I'm going to keep us in the 90s. We're going to go from 1993 to 1996, and I'm not going to bury the lead. We're watching Twister.
I'm sorry. You have to understand my text message history for like the last 4 days to really know how this lands. We're dating it a little bit. Twisters just came out in cinemas, and I've heard a lot about it. So you know what? Twister, I'm looking forward to it. I remember enjoying this film. I can't imagine it holds up visually. I'm keen.
Look, either way, it's going to be a good time. So now look, don't get it twisted. Okay, see what I did there?
I heard what you did.
We are watching Twister.
The
not
Helen
Twisters.
Hunt, Bill Paxton.
Yeah. So Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, Philip Seymour Hoffman. So look, it's going to be a good time, and I hope that you're all there for us as well. But until that time, Ben, why don't you tell the good listeners where they can find our magical product?
Absolutely. You can find us on YouTube at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. You can find us on Spotify and Apple podcast under Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. If you, it's been a bit lax lately, but I'll pick it up now. If you want to follow our Instagram, it's Jim_and_Ben. Please like, please subscribe, please comment, please rate and review. We'd really love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for going on this movie journey with me. Can't wait to go into the skies with some cows and barns with you next week. Thank you so much for listening to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures.
Bye.